So in Material Master detailed explanation, the 11th one, advanced planning. So the first topic in advanced planning, plan explosion. You use this field to specify which task list type the system uses to create receipt in production planning and detailed scheduling. So the next one, priority of product. The system can derive the priority of the order from the priority of the product. You can assign values from 0 to 255 for the priority. The value 1 represents the highest priority, whereas 225 is the lowest priority. You can enter, if you enter the value 0 or no value, the system equates this with the priority 255. The priority field of the production planning and detailed scheduling tab pages display only. In production planning and detailed scheduling, the order priority can be derived from the product priority or the sales order. On the basis of the order priority, you can make a planning decision, for example, or carry out a sequence planning using a detailed scheduling. You specify which priority the system uses in production planning or detailed scheduling in the planning version field. The next one, PP planning procedure, defines for each planning relevant event that can occur for a location product which action is executed by production planning and detailed scheduling. In SAP APO, if this event occurs, the PP planning procedure also determines for customer requirements whether the desired quantity or confirmed quantity of a schedule line is relevant for begging usage. You assign a planning procedure to each location product that you want to plan in production planning and detailed scheduling. You make this assignment in this location product master. Planning procedures are identified by the key 1 to 9 and A to Z. 1 to 9 for SAP namespace, A to Z for customer namespace. So the next one, planning group. The planning group is used as a selection criterion with which you can restrict the selection of a product to be planned in the production planning run. A procurement planning heuristic or an MRP heuristic may only plan a product in the production planning run if the product belongs to one of the planning group specified in the product selection. So then, product heuristic. A heuristic is based on an algorithm in which the planning procedure is implemented. Technically, the algorithm is a function module. SAP delivers various standard algorithms. Generally, there are various settings for an algorithm with which you can influence selected characteristics of the planning procedure. With these different settings, you can define various heuristic for one algorithm. So the next one is conversion rule. Conversion rule specifies the checks that the system is to carry out during the conversion of planned orders and purchase requisitions into production and purchase orders. Use the system execute the checks in the SAP APO system. If the conversion indicator is set for an order, if you transfer an order to the SAP R3 system and convert it with the conversion indicator set, if one of the check produces an error, the consequences may be as follows. The conversion indicator cannot be set, the order cannot be transferred to the R3 system and converted. So the next one is requirement strategy. Determine how quantities forecasted in demand planning and produced and how the demand forecast is consumed with the sales orders. SAP delivers the requirement strategies listed below. You can also define your own strategies. See define requirement strategy. So the strategy number 10, make to stock production. Strategy number 20, planning with final assembly. Strategy number 21, planning with third party orders. Strategy number 30, planning without final assembly. Strategy number 35, planning without final assembly for configurable material. Then strategy number 40, planning product. So what is meant by begging? Begging is used to assign suitable existing product receipts and product stocks which can cover the requirement to a product requirement. Begging organizes the material flow through all BOM levels from the procurement of components and raw materials to deliver a sales order. For example, minimum passing amount for continuous begging indicates the minimum passing amount for a continuous input/output node usage. The system splits the receipt element in factors of the value specified in this field. So the next one, retain fixed begging for product on document change. You use this indicator to retain fixed begging for the product even after a document change. For example, after converting a planned order into a production order. Begging strategy for dynamic begging. Using the begging strategy, you can determine in which time sequence the system should cover requirements for the product with dynamic begging and in which time sequence the system should use the product receipts in the begging interval to cover your requirements. Thus, the begging strategy controls which requirements the system should cover first, which receipts the system should use first. Generally, for dynamic begging, the system begins by covering the earliest requirement and then processes the next requirement and so on. Since there may be several receipts for the availability dates and times within the begging interval, we must specify which receipt the system should use first. The following options exist. So the next one, avoid alerts in begging. You can set this indicator. The system attempts to create the begging relationships between requirements and receipts if possible without quantity alerts or date alerts. First, the system link receipts and requirements that are compatible on a time and quantity basis. Then the remaining receipts and requirements in a second step. Use/consume entire quantity of a receipt element. If you set this indicator, the system may assign a stock element for the product to just one requirement element in dynamic begging. The requirement element must thus completely consume the stock element. So the next one, alert threshold for yearly receipt. The system creates a date and time alert for a fixed or a dynamic begging relationship if the yearliness exceeds the alert threshold. That is, if the availability date and time is earlier than the specified time frame before the requirement's date. You specify the time frame in the format hour and minute. Example, 100 10 means 1000 into 10 means 1000 hours and 10 minutes. 20 then 20 means 20 hours and 20 minutes. If we do not specify a value, the system uses the value. So 1 lakh hour and 0 minutes. Therefore, the system only creates an alert if an availability date and time is more than the 1 lakh hours before the requirement date. So the next one, alert threshold for delayed receipts. The system creates a date and time alert for a fixed or a dynamic begging relationship. If the delay exceeds the alert threshold, that is, if the availability date and time is later than the specified time frame after the requirements date. You specify time frame in the format hour and minutes. Example, 1000 hour 10 minutes, 20 hour 20 minutes. If you do not specify a value, the system uses the value 0. Therefore, the system creates an alert if the availability date and time is after the requirement date. So the next one, resource network, indicates the name of the resource network. A resource network describes the physical links between resources in a plant, such as processing units, reactors, vessels, and so on. It explains the flow of materials through a plant. So then, product alerts. In this field, you specify whether the system determines direct alerts for a requirement or a receipt of a product. The product is relevant to network alerts. If the product is relevant to network alerts, the system evaluates the direct alert that it determines for this product for receipts or requirements at the superordinate levels of the begging structure as well. You can hide alert for less critical component and thus increase the clarity and transparency of the network alerts. So then, improve performance. If you choose the option do not determine any alerts, the system will not determine any direct alert for the product. The product is thus also not relevant with regard to network alerts. Unit of measure of lot size indicates the valid unit of measure. The following option exists. No lot size unit maintained. The base unit of measure maintained for the product applies. Then unit of measure maintained, which can be converted to the base unit of measure, which means alternative or base unit of measure. So the dependencies, if you enter an alternative unit of measure, the conversion to the base unit of measure must be maintained on the tab unit of measure. The alternative unit of measure must be able to converted to the base unit of measure for the product, as otherwise the unit will not be accepted. The conversion from alternative to base unit of measure is depend on the material. For example, the alternative unit of measure is kilogram, the base unit of measure is quantity. So 5 kg corresponding to 3 quantity or 3 pieces. So the next topic, refreshment lead time in calendar days. So number of calendar days needed to obtain the product including its components through in-house production or external procurement. The field is now obsolete. Planning calendar. So what is meant by planning calendar? Planning calendar defines flexible periods for a period lot sizing procedure in master production scheduling (MPS) and in material requirement planning (MRP). The system group together the entire requirement which fall within period which mentioned in planning calendar from a lot. Planning calendar depend on the factory calendar. So whenever changes happen in factory calendar, we need to update the planning calendar also. So what are the prerequisites to create planning calendar? Planning calendar assigned to the material in master data, MRP2 view, lot size assigned in MRP, material master 1 view. So we can use the lot size PK, period lot size, for planning calendar. For creation, change or display of the planning calendar, go to the T code, MD25 to create, MD26 to change or edit, MD27 to display the planning calendar. Create the planning calendar with respect to the plant. So planning calendar calculation rule. With the help of the calculation rule, we can achieve planning calendar requirement. So the first type, weeks in weekdays. This calculation rule for create requirement for per week. We can create requirement for any day of week. Suppose if we select the 1, 2, 3 in below calculation rule, systems create the requirement for every week Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Using this calculation rule, you can create the requirement for any day of week. Please check below snapshot of period and calendar. Second one, months, weekdays. This calculation rule for create requirement for per month. We can create requirement for any counter week of a week day. Suppose if we select the one as counter weekday and select weekday as Friday, system calculated and create requirement for every month first week of Friday. Using this calculation rule, you can create the requirement for any day of week in a particular month. Please check below the snapshot of period and calendar. Third one, months, work days. This calculation rule for create requirement for per month work days. Suppose if we select the 1, 5, 10 working days of per month. In that case, system create the requirement for every month, first, 5th and 10th working days. With the help of this rule, you can create requirement of any day of the month. In planning calendar, system not count the non-working days as per respective factory calendar. Please check the below snapshot for period and the calendar. Fourth type, years and work days. This calculation rule similar to the above calculation rule month work days. We can define work day slash days for year in planning calendar according to the factory calendar. Fifth one, work days. This calculation rule for create requirement for work days. Suppose if we create the requirement for 10 work days, in that case system create requirement after every 10 working days. We have to mention calculation start date. System not count the non-working days as per factory calendar changes. Sixth one, weekdays. This calculation helpful to create the requirement for any week of work days. We create the requirement for every alternate week, second of Thursday. 4. We can create requirement for any week work days. We have to mention calculation start date. In planning calendar, system not count the non-working days as per the respective factory calendar. So the next one, reorder days supply. Use in production planning and detailed scheduling. Specify the reorder days supply if you have defined a reorder point method 2 for the location product. Production planning and detailed scheduling. Threshold value for the days supply of a location product below which procurement proposals should be created for the location product. The reorder days supply is evaluated within the consumption based procurement. The reorder point procedures in production planning and detailed scheduling can be used for this evaluation. So the next one, target days supply. Use in production planning and detailed scheduling, PP/DS. The PP/DS standard heuristic SAP PP002 planning of standard lots takes into account the target days supply if you have selected the target stock level method target days supply from product master. So the next one, target stock level method. The target stock level is value for the available warehouse stock level that you want to reach through planning. When planning with the standard heuristic planning of standard lots SAP PP02 The lot size depends on the target stock level. If you have chosen an exact lot sizing procedure under the safety stock method or 4 to 7 in the product master, then in planning the procurement proposals are created so that the safety stock level or the target days supply is reached. With the target stock method, 4 target stock level equal to maximum stock level plus safety stocks. Procurement is only carried out again if the stock level falls below the safety stock level. If the current stocks falls below the safety stock, a new procurement proposal is generated to fill the target stock level and cover the current requirement. So this is the example target stock level method, planning with the target stock. So target stock level equal to maximum stock level plus safety stock level. So once the stock goes to below the safety stock, planning generates procurement proposal because the stock has fallen below the safety stock level. So the next one, method for calculating safety stock. This checkbox is used to automatically determine the safety stock methods based on the values of MRP type under MRP tab 1, safety stock and safety time under the MRP tab 2. You can select the safety stock method determination checkbox for the safety stock method to be determined automatically. On selecting the checkbox, the safety stock method field is disabled and is automatically filled with the recommended safety stock method based on the values of MRP type, safety stock and safety time. The table below displays the automatically filled safety stock methods in production planning and detailed scheduling depend on the various scenarios when the checkbox is marked. If you do not select the checkbox, then the validation for the value of safety stock methods is triggered based on the value of MRP type, safety stock and safety time that you have filled. So the next one, period factor for calculating the availability date and time. Factor used by the system to calculate the availability date and time of a receipt element within a time period. Usage, the system determines the exact availability date and time of the receipt elements within a period by adding a time interval to the start time of the period. You can enter a factor between 0 and 1, where 0 is the start of the period, 0.5 is the middle, and 1 is the end of the period. When calculating the availability date and time, the system takes into consideration all weekdays, meaning that it does not take into consideration any days that have been defined as non-work days in the calendar. The following applications can take the period factor into account. Period lot sizing procedure in production planning and detailed scheduling. So the next field, use period factor. You use this indicator to define how the system determines the desired availability date and time of the receipt that should cover the requirements in a period. The indicator is relevant for period based planning and is thus relevant for the following applications: period lot sizing procedure in production planning and detailed scheduling. So usage in period lot sizing procedure. If you do not set the use period indicator, the desired availability date and time of the receipt element is the first requirement date time in the period. If you set the use period indicator, the system calculates the desired availability date and time from the period duration defined by the period type, the number of periods of the period lot sizing procedure, and the period factor from the period factor field. So the date and time at which the system actually schedules a receipt element depend on further factors such as the planning time fence and strategy settings that are being used for detailed scheduling or the resource utilizations. So the next one, maximum days of supply active. The indicator is relevant for following applications: production planning optimizer in production planning and detailed scheduling. Then product planning table usage in production planning optimizer. For the production planning optimizer to receipt maximum days of supply constraint, this maximum days of supply active indicator and the time dependent maximum days of supply indicator both need to be set. If you do not set any one indicator out of these two, the maximum days of supply constraint will not get respected by the production planning optimizer. So the next one, period factor time dependent stock levels. Period factor for time dependent stock levels is the factor used by the system to calculate the availability time of changes applied to time dependent stock level within a day. The system determines the exact validity time in case of changes to time dependent stock levels within a day by adding a time interval to the start time of the day. You can enter a factor between 0 and 1, where 0 denotes the start of the day, 0.5 the middle, and 1 end of the day. While calculating the availability time, the system does not take into consideration any non-working times of resources or days that have been defined as non-working days in the calendars. The following time dependent stock levels can be the period factor into account. The number one, time dependent safety stock and creation of virtual safety stock element. Number two, time dependent maximum stock. Number three, time dependent safety days. Number four, time dependent maximum days of supply. The following applications can take the period factor for time dependent stock levels into account. So the number one, time independent safety stock methods MB, MZ and MM in production planning and detailed scheduling. So the second one, product view SAP APO / RRP3, product view periodic SAP APO PPT1, process receipts SAP APO RRP4 and process requirements SAP APO RRP1. Example, if you specify 0.75 for the period factor and maintain an increment of time dependent safety stock from 80 Ps to 100 Ps on 1.10, then the availability time of the virtual safety stock element of 20 Ps created on 1.10 is 18 hours 0 minutes. So the next one, goods receipt processing time. The time between the delivery or the production of the product and its availability as stock. This time is used, for example, as handling time or the time for quality checks and is added to the transportation duration or the production time of a product. So example, the transportation durations / production time 3 days. So goods receipt processing time 1 day, so equal to 3 day plus 1 day, totally 4 days. The product is available on the 5th day. So the next one, goods issue processing time. The time between issuing the product from storage and transporting it. This time is used as handling time or time for quality control and is added to the transport duration. Example, goods issue time 1 day, so transport duration 3 days. So 1 plus 3 equal to totally 4 days. The product is available on the 5th day. So the next one, handling capacity consumption in unit measure. Goods receipt used by the heuristic and optimizer to calculate how much handling resource capacity is consumed by the product for a particular plan. Example, if the handling resources can handle 1000 liter per day and you define the handling capacity consumption as 10 liter per piece, the maximum rate is 100 piece per day. Handling capacity consumption in unit of measure, goods issue used by the heuristic and optimizer to calculate how much handling resource capacity is consumed by the product for a particular plan. Example, if the handling resource can handle 1000 liters per day and you define the handling capacity consumption as 10 liters per piece, the maximum rate is 100 piece per day. So the next one, shelf life of a material. Shelf life is that length of time the food and drink or medicine and other perishable items are given before they are considered unsuitable for sale or consumption. In some regions, a best before use by or freshness date is required on packaged perishable foods. Shelf life is the time that products can be stored during which the defined quality of specified proportion of the goods remains acceptable under expected conditions of distribution, storage, and display. Shelf life is different from expiration date. The former related to food quality, the later to food safety. Pharmaceuticals are similar. The regulations can restrict the sale and the use of pharmaceutical which have exceeded their expiration date. So the next one, procurement cost for product. In this field, you can specify cost for procuring a location product that are taken into account optimization based planning in production planning optimizer. So the next one, product dependent storage cost, used in production planning and detailed scheduling to calculate how much it costs to store the product in the associated storage resources per the base unit of measure and per day. So it's like a warehouse. You can use the transactions SAP APO slash TMREF to change the time reference from day to another time unit. The next one, safety stock penalty. Penalty cost for safety stock violation. So the next one, penalty exceeding time dependent max days of supply, indicates the penalty applied by the production planning optimizer per unit quantity of the product. This penalty is charged in case days of coverage provided by the stored quantity of a product exceeds maximum days of supply maintained in the time dependent stock levels.